Hello, everyone. My name is Etan Bernstein. I'm a managing partner of the People Advisory Group at AKT. Thank you for joining us for this webinar. We are holding this webinar because we find that many multinational companies really struggle in managing their benefits and pension programs in Israel. There are a number of reasons this is true. The significant regulatory changes which are happening are common in Israel and in other markets as well, but here we have barely any materials available in English, which makes it very hard to understand what's going on. The second is that we know that the Israeli market is very different. The legal environment, the regulatory situation, and the vendor ecosystem operates very differently than in other markets. And there's a basic lack of trust between the multinational headquarters and the local subsidiaries in many cases around the operation of HR and benefits areas. Even though there is open communication, there's often a sense that things aren't flowing, that not all the information is available. At AKT, we recognize these challenges and are doing our best to help multinationals bridge this gap and operate effectively in Israel with their benefits and pension plans. We have done this by generating a lot of content in English. We understand that you need to understand what's going on, and therefore generating both white papers and content to explain the benefits and regulatory changes, the webinars like this one to communicate that, and we've created a mini site on benefits to help you have information about the benefits in Israel. We've also built a team of professionals who bridge the Israel global gap around benefits and pension. All of them are British and American actuaries and benefit professionals who live in Israel, understand the local market, but are able to explain the benefits environment in a language that is aligned with the way you look at the rest of the world and that understands how you operate in other places in the world and explain things in those terms. This webinar is part of those efforts to bridge those gaps. I'd like to invite Elana Schroeder, who leads the AKT Global Benefits team, to take you through the rest of the webinar. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on benefits in Israel. My name is Elana Schroeder. I'm a benefits consultant at AKT here in Israel. And today I'm going to talk to you about all aspects of benefits management in Israel. A number of topics that we will cover will be on compliance, the benefits environment here in Israel, and why managing benefits in Israel can sometimes be complex for multinationals. In this session, we're going to cover a number of topics. We will discuss managing benefits in Israel and how sometimes the benefits environment in Israel can make it slightly more complex than some of the other places in the world to be able to manage your benefits successfully and to really understand what's going on the ground here in Israel. We will go through a number of regulation and compliance issues and discuss some of the regulatory changes that have happened over the last couple of years. Next, we'll move on to talk a little bit about the benefits ecosystem, discussing some of the key players here that global companies have to deal with when managing their benefits, and some of these challenges that we regularly see that global companies do face with that process. After that, we'll move on to a case study, a project that we worked on with a global high-tech company, and I think it's a really, really good example of some of the issues global companies face here in Israel in managing their benefits and how we supported them in, moving on with improving their benefits, improving their processes. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. And towards the end of the webinar, I'll go through the role of having a benefits consultant here in Israel and some of the services that we provide and basically how we can help you move forward, understand the benefits environment and manage any of the risks that you may have. So the benefits landscape in Israel is pretty complex. I would say it's more complex than some of the other countries that you're probably familiar with and used to working with on a day-to-day basis. As you know, benefits really are a critical part of an employee's total rewards package, and that is the same anywhere you go in the world. And here in Israel in particular, those benefits really can make up a large percentage of base pay. So in some instances, we're talking about 30 to 40% of base pay, which is really considered a lot. Often what we find is that the value of these benefits really are not clear to employees. And many employees, sit here in Israel, they are receiving often wonderful benefits packages, and they just don't, they perhaps don't know what benefits they're entitled to, what rights they have, they haven't received communications necessarily about their benefits, or how to enroll or register, and just general education. So we really find that companies with operations in Israel really need to invest more in communications and education. And we are seeing that slowly change, and companies are investing more into that area, which is amazing. As you know, it's very important to provide attractive benefits package. One of the reasons, obviously, to attract and retain good quality employees, and really to make your company stand out in the market as a competitive company and workplace, and somewhere that employees want to come. They want to come every day. They want to work and do a great job for your organisation. So very, very important to consider benefits and really to understand what's going on here locally in Israel in order to do so. Now, some of the core benefits are pretty common across the board. So things like pension and private medical insurance are benefits that we would typically see companies offering. And then some more unusual benefits, perhaps, for those in the rest of the world. But things like food and restaurant vouchers are very, very popular here in Israel. I think we just love to eat, so that's always a good thing. That's, that benefit, for example, is something that employees would expect as part of their benefits package, and we don't always see that in the rest of the world. So, that's a little quirk that is pretty specific to Israel. Managing benefits in Israel, this is something I really want to talk about. This is a really kind of key, if there's going to be a takeaway from this webinar, I think this is it. Now, you're probably sitting in whichever country you're in right now listening to this webinar, and you'll read this list, and I'm sure a lot of it will resonate with the experiences that you have or are having currently. And these are the challenges that we see multinational organisations facing in managing their benefits here in Israel. Now, often companies feel very uncomfortable with the benefits environment in Israel, and there's a number of reasons for that. So I'm sure you recognise some of these on the list, but I'm going to go through these because I think they're very, very important to hear and to understand. So in Israel, there really is a lack of good quality, trustworthy information in English. And so we really do see a lot of the vendors either providing information in Hebrew only or in very, very poor English. Sometimes the quality is so bad that it's, literally just been copied and pasted the Hebrew into Google Translate, and then that English has been sent on to companies as communications. So really, really unprofessional, not trustworthy at all. And the number one thing that we hear from companies and from our clients is, we just want to understand benefits in plain English. So, we just need to know what's going on. We really want to understand. Up until now, we haven't had that support, and it's really a key takeaway from this is having that information in English, and many companies struggle with that. As I mentioned before, some of the benefits in Israel are slightly different, and employees prioritise benefits here differently. So as within the rest of the world, I'm sure in different countries, employees prioritise different benefits kind of in a different way. And here is no different. So it's just getting used to really the benefits that your employees appreciate. I think that's a very, very important point to note. Nextly, rapidly changing legislation and regulatory environment. So in the last 3 years in particular in Israel, 3 to 4 years I should say, the regulatory environment here for pensions has had a total overhaul. So really has changed a lot. Many different regulatory updates, and we'll touch a little bit more about that a bit later on the next slides. So I won't go into too much detail, but as you can imagine, all companies want to remain compliant, very, very important. And with a rapidly changing regulatory environment, it's of key importance. In Israel, the vendors, so insurance agents, insurance companies, and payroll companies, all of the types of vendors that you would be working with in order to manage your benefits, kind of the levels of service that we see really is a lot lower than in other countries around the world. So what you may be used to, for example, in the UK or the US or in parts of Europe, the service levels here really aren't as great. We do see kind of a large amount of mistakes, and in terms of data and transparency of data, there are definitely some issues which make it harder to manage your benefits. And also in terms of systems, so the systems that these companies use can sometimes be outdated, and any output that comes from them can be complex. So definitely makes benefits harder and to manage, and it's a challenge that most companies do face. Lastly, this is quite an important point that might resonate with some of you. So local HR business leaders here in Israel typically, from our experience, want to make decisions locally. They don't always want to involve, for example, their regional HR teams or their regional business leaders or global business leaders. They often want to just go off on their own, organise benefits, and kind of make decisions here locally, and not always keep their global counterparts up to date and informed about those decisions and any kind of changes that they've made. Now that obviously leads to a major lack of transparency for the regional teams, and oftentimes can actually lead to a lack of trust, which is pretty frightening, because you're part of the one company. It should be that two employees regionally and locally trust each other, work closely together, but oftentimes we see that this is not the case, and can sometimes lead to breakdown in relationships, and especially with managing their benefits, many challenges we see the companies facing because of that legislation. And as I mentioned in the previous on the previous slide, there's been a lot of regulatory change in the pensions world in Israel, specifically in the last 3 to 4 years. And in 2016 alone, we saw the largest change in over 20 years to pensions in Israel. So really, there was a total overhaul of the whole market, and the insurance regulator really cracked down. Now, one of the reasons for that, well, the main reason for that is for increased transparency, freedom of choice and competition. So the regulator really wanted to kind of switch the responsibility from employers to employees in terms of pensions. So before 2016, employers had a major say in which insurance agency and which type of pension fund, for example, that an employee would have at their company. But from 2016 onwards, that decision and that right became the employees. So now, from 2016 onwards, the employee has the right to choose any insurance agent they want to use on the market, and any pension fund, any insurance product. Really, they've been given the freedom of choice. And that's a major point, because that fact alone has really changed the way that companies have had to look at their pensions and manage their benefits. So yeah, as I said, the regulators really crack down. There are financial fines to employers for non-compliance, and we really, companies come to us all the time. They want to make sure they're compliant with these regulations, and it's super important. You don't want to have a compliance risk sitting on your head, and knowing that all of these regulatory changes have happened and you haven't done anything to ensure that the compliance has been, the regulation has been adhered to in your company. So very, very important. Now, as I mentioned, most of the change did happen in 2016, but these changes are continuing to happen. Pensions regulation, benefits regulation is constantly updating, and we're constantly seeing changes. And over the past couple of years, it's just, and for the foreseeable future, we expect this just to increase year on year. I'm not going to go into this in detail. I don't want to bore you all with all the kind of nitty-gritty facts about all the different regulatory changes, but I just wanted to really highlight here that you can see here 2016, a number of changes occurred, and then on to 2017. Now, you will have a copy of these slides after the webinar, so if you want to kind of relay back to these, I would recommend doing so, especially if legislation is something that you're interested in, then feel free to kind of read up on this. Now, going on to 2018 and 2019, you can see that these regulatory changes and updates have continued to evolve. The most recent one and most important one this year being the discontinuation of trustee accounts. And I'll explain a little bit about this because it's pretty important to be aware of what's going on. So funds administrators in Israel are insurance agencies who are engaged by every employer in Israel. Every employer has to have a funds administrator in place for pensions, and the funds administrator's role, which I'll actually explain a little bit more about this later in the webinar, but just to, on a high level note here, the funds administrator's role is actually to transfer pension payments to insurance companies each month, report those payments, handle any queries and escalations, and basically administer the payments and the plans. Now, the funds administrators have a trustee account whereby the companies would transfer the money for the pension payments deposits each month into those trustee accounts, and then the funds administrator would transfer those payments from their trustee account onto the insurance companies each month. So that's really been a key kind of service or role that they've provided for their clients. Now, from January 2020, the use of those trustee accounts will actually will come to an end. They will be discontinued for more than 100 employees, and for companies with less than 100 employees, that will come into force the following year, so January 2021. So really at the moment, we are working with our clients on coming up with a solution of how those, after January 2020, and how those payments will be transferred, because they won't be able to use the trustee accounts anymore. So that's something that we are making sure our clients are compliant with, and we're helping them, we're discussing different solutions, and it's just something to be aware of and to make sure that it's on your radar. So moving on to discuss a little bit about the benefits ecosystem here in Israel, because I think it's pretty important to understand the different vendors, and in terms of your benefits management as a company, who you are interacting with on a day-to-day basis, what are their roles, and what are the processes that are in place to make sure that everything runs smoothly. So if you see on the top left here, HR benefits company contact, so that would be someone like yourself, a benefits person, HR person, someone in your company, in your organisation, who would be the contact, who, you know, oftentimes companies have a local HR person contact on the ground here in Israel, and that's great. They would usually take up that role. But we do work with many organisations who don't have that function here locally on the ground. So they really rely on someone on a regional level to kind of act as that point of contact. Moving on, there's payroll. So this would be your local payroll provider and the company who's you know, making the pension payments and dealing with salaries and everything in terms of payroll locally on the ground here. And then the bottom we have split it down into two here. We've got the funds administrator and the employer nominated insurance agent. Now, a lot of companies have used the one company here in Israel to provide both of those functions. But there are companies who they have two separate companies, and I'll explain a little bit about what the roles of these players actually are. So the funds administrator, which we spoke about a little bit when we were talking about the legislation, their job is to manage all the payments to the insurance companies each month, the pensions, to report them and make sure they're administered properly, handle any rejections and escalations, as well as other services. And they act on the behalf of yourself as the company. And yeah, their service is to employers. Now, on the employee side, employees, you know, when they start a company, they want to sit down with an insurance agent and make their pension arrangements, decide what pension fund they want to open. So they usually sit down with an insurance agent. Now, as we spoke about earlier, it's their right since 2016 under the Freedom of Choice Act to either to basically pick any insurance agent you wish to use. Okay, so they don't have to use one that's specifically nominated here by the company, and they can use their friend, their neighbour, anyone who they feel comfortable with using. But in this instance, what we're talking about here is an insurance agent who's actually nominated by the company for the employees to use if they wish to do so. So, you know, there's reasons to do this. The company can negotiate beneficial terms, for example, for different pension products, so that their employees can really benefit from, you know, competitive terms and conditions. So that's one of the reasons to do this, and mainly to give the employees a choice, and to make sure that employers are looking out for their employees and giving them that option of an agent to use. But as I said, they don't have to use that agent, they can use any agent of their choice. In the middle here, you can see AKT, or, you know, our role as benefits consultants. Now, transactionally, we don't actually handle any of the transactions between any of these companies, any of these vendors, but we do act as a support to the companies, to our clients, in managing the relationships between these different parties, managing the processes, making sure everything's working smoothly, you know, helping with escalations and any other questions or queries. So we really are there on a day-to-day basis for our clients to kind of support them in this, as you can see, kind of messy benefits environment and ecosystem, and just make sure that you know, they feel comfortable basically working in Israel and managing their benefits here. So I spoke a little bit earlier about the challenges that we see multinationals in Israel facing, and I just wanted to, because I think this is really important, and as I said before, this is really one of the key takeaways from this webinar. It might even be the key takeaway. So yeah, if you haven't paid attention up until now, this is a very important slide with lots of useful information. So yeah, as I said before, we do see companies facing these challenges. So language barrier, as we spoke about, companies just want to be able to understand what's going on in plain English, and a number of these vendors, their English isn't great, all the documents, communications, and everything is in Hebrew. So that makes it really difficult and complex for companies outside of Israel to be able to understand what's going on. Systems are typically outdated. Often the data isn't transparent, isn't always readable, and just the quality really of the data, the quality of the systems are not really what you might be used to in some other countries in the world. Processes. So as I spoke about before on the previous slide, it's really, really important that processes are put in place so that the different, players or vendors in the benefits kind of life cycle, they all know what their responsibilities are, what tasks they have to do each month, and this is so critical, because any delays in these tasks can lead to confusion, can lead to regulation not being adhered to. There are different deadlines that are set in play by regulation that have to be adhered to, and oftentimes if there aren't clear, efficient processes in place between all the different parties, things kind of fall through the cracks. Timelines and deadlines aren't always met. So that's another challenge that we definitely see companies face. And then again with the HR, some companies don't have a local HR function here in Israel. So sometimes what happens is either a regional HR or benefits person will take on that role to act as the point of contact. And now oftentimes, they're not as knowledgeable to local, like the pensions regulation, the local benefits. There's physical distance as well as cultural and language differences, which does, increase risks and challenges. Sometimes also companies, if they don't have a local HR function, what they might do is nominate, a local site head or office manager or someone else here on the ground to be that benefits contact for the different vendors and for the different processes. And that can often cause issues as well, because those people also don't have the knowledge that they require really, in terms of benefits and all of the regulation and the processes in order to be able to do that job properly and fulfill that role as best as possible. So yeah, it can be a challenge to global companies when they don't have that local kind of HR benefits function in place. Okay, so case study. This is a really interesting one that I wanted to go through with you today. Now, this was a company that came to us recently, a global high-tech company. They have around 400 employees in Israel. They have a history of acquisitions, so they've made a number of acquisitions over the years. Now, because of that fact, that has led to them having multiple funds administrators and a number of insurance agencies in place. So instead of most companies, we would recommend to have one funds administrator in place, just makes things a lot easier in terms of administration. This company actually had multiple funds administrators in place. They also had a high volume of employee escalations. Employees were receiving letters from insurance companies that their payments weren't being transferred in time, or there were certain issues that they were facing. And just overall, there was a really, really complex pensions environment. All of these factors led to this company coming to us and asking for our help in trying to figure out what could be done and how we could improve the situation. So they actually engaged us to carry out a pensions audit, which is one of the services that we provide to our clients, and to review all of their retirement programs in terms of compliance. So making sure that they're complying with all of the regulation that's in force. Yeah, key point, obviously it's a major compliance risk if they weren't adhering to any of the regulation, especially since 2016. As you know, there are fines that are can be given out by the regulators, so very important. Also to review their programs in terms of cost structure. So both in the costs in the cost to them as an employer, like how much are they actually paying, for example, for funds administration services each month? How much are they paying for long-term stability for their employees? And then also on the side of the employees, to actually look kind of to investigate the management fees that the employees are paying on their different funds, and just really make sure that they're competitive, which is very important, and to make sure that they're not too high. The last point is reviewing their programs in terms of operations. So all of the processes that we spoke about between all the different parties, all the different vendors and players in this benefits life cycle, just making sure that everything's running smoothly. When there's a new hire that comes into the organisation or when there's termination, making sure that there's a process in place and nothing's falling through the cracks. So these are the results of the pensions audit that we carried out. And I think it's really important to just understand here that there wasn't just one or two things that we found here. There were multiple issues, multiple outcomes of this audit. We really carried out a deep dive into all of their programs and processes, and these, you can see in front of you, there were a number of problems here. So I'm going to run through these just to give you an example and a feel for some of the issues that global companies are facing, and in particular this company. So when we actually looked into the funds administrators, I should say, that were in place, there were no contracts, no service level agreements, nothing in writing to say, what services should the funds administrator be providing to the company. So as you can imagine, this is a major compliance risk. Uncertainty around services in place. The company really had no clue about what services they should be receiving and what is typical in the market. So we arranged for SLAs, contracts to be prepared and put in place and signed, make sure that everything was in line from a legal point of view. So that was very important. The next point was what I said before about them, because they had a history of acquisitions, and they actually had multiple funds administrators in place. So this just led to a really complex administration of benefits, and we wanted to streamline this and move everything over to one provider, which we did. Management fees, so now we're talking about costs. So these are the costs to the employees. We actually found, looking at the management fees that the employees were paying on their pensions, were particularly high for a company of that size, which meant that employees just weren't able to benefit from competitive rates, which as an employer is very problematic. You want to provide the lowest possible management fees for your employees to benefit from. So in order to kind of rectify this, we negotiated with the providers to lower the management fees for the employees. Onto long-term disability. Long-term disability, this is a cost on the employer's side in Israel. The employer pays for the long-term disability premiums for their employees. We really found that the rates were high. There was a collective tariff that was in place, but it wasn't being applied to all of the employees, or for all the employees, I should say, which, as you can see, meant that the employer, the company, was overpaying for this cover, for their long-term disability cover. And so our solution for that was we negotiated with the providers, we lowered the long-term disability rates, and we also made sure that the collective tariff that was in force was being applied for all of the employees in the organisation. Now, I know I've gone on and on and on, I probably sound like a broken record, but I've gone on and on and on about processes. Processes it really is one of the most important takeaways from this webinar, how important it is to have clear and efficient processes and procedures in place for managing benefits in Israel. This organisation did not have any clear processes in place. This was a major compliance risk. The different parties, the different vendors weren't always sure about what their responsibilities were and which tasks should be done by which company, and this meant a number of delays in meeting deadlines, which was very, very problematic. So this was a major compliance risk that we found, and we actually helped this organisation create work processes and process maps to cover all the different stages of the life cycle for the benefits. So a new hire, what happens when a new hire starts the organisation, what happens when an employee terminates, and kind of on the ongoing payments and changes as well. So that was a kind of a key point here that we helped this company with. And I mentioned at the beginning of this webinar about employee communication. So employee communication is so important. It's important that the employees understand what their rights are, what their obligations are, what they're entitled to in terms of on a statutory level, and also from their employer, and what's their benefits package. This company, we found, this organisation, there was a lack of communication, especially around their kind of the pension and retirement programmes, which meant that the employees just were not aware of their rights. They didn't understand that, for example, they could choose their own agent, they could choose any pension product in the market. They didn't know that that was their entitlement. And so we actually created an onboarding kit of documents, which was to be sent to all new employees, and I believe it was actually sent to all of the employees in the organisation at the time, regardless of whether they were new or not, so that they would understand and be aware of what their rights and obligations were from their side. And we also ran some education sessions on site for employees, which was great. It really tied off this whole process. We explained what we did in the pensions audit and the changes that we'd made, and it was great. Very interactive sessions that we ran for them. Okay, I'm going to briefly run through this slide. Because I'll go into a little bit more detail on the next slide about our services. Here you can see some of the some of the services, or I guess the roles and the tasks and the kind of the things that we do as benefits consultants, and how we help our clients kind of on an ongoing basis. So as we spoke about before, in terms of managing the work processes between all the different parties and all the different vendors, providing support to HR and benefits functions, and helping employers to manage their benefits, any queries or escalations or questions, anything like that. Our ongoing benefits management model, we provide that service, and we help our clients manage those functions. Now, I do have to say, we are not, AKT is not a broker, an agent, an insurance company, and we don't receive any types of commissions from anyone. So our sole income is through our consultants, our fees from our clients for consulting. Okay, so we work with actually all of the different vendors in the market, all of the different agencies and insurance companies. One of the things to point out here, which we actually do on an ongoing kind kind of benefits management model. Under that model, something that we actually do is we carry out monitoring exercises. So these are kind of mini audits, if you want to call it that, where we look at retirement programs that are in place, and we make sure pension payments are transferred correctly to the insurance providers and on time. We ensure that all of the processes are in place properly. New hires and leavers in the organisation are dealt with properly, and we, on an ongoing basis as well, we review all of the terms relating to long-term disability, management fees, and contracts and service level agreements are in place with all the different the agencies and the funds administrators. Okay, so this is kind of provides a clear picture of our services, which are actually broken down into project-based services and ongoing services. And it's kind of been divided further into pension, non-insured benefits and health, because these three fields are really kept quite separate in Israel. So pension and health are kept quite pretty separately, and then non-insured benefits, or perks if you want to call them, is also kind of separate. So under our project-based services, as you can see, a number of ways that we can support companies. So we help with setting up funds administrators for new companies in Israel, also companies who just want to run an RFP for a new funds administrator, for example. We can help in that process. Pensions audits, which I explained in the case study earlier, and that's really a deep dive, into all of the areas of the retirement programs. For non-insured benefits, we benchmark benefits. We as part of the benefits review or standalone, and also setting up benefits for companies. So either, oftentimes, if it's a new company or a global company with a new entity in Israel, we will help them select their vendors, set up their benefits, and make sure everything is in place properly. And then for health, so in Israel, really you have to have around 100 employees to have a group health insurance plan in place. So we help organisations with running an RFP to implement a group health insurance plan, and also for companies that are smaller that don't have as many employees, but who still want their employees to benefit from health insurance. We help them with setting up private individual health insurance policies as well. And then moving on to the ongoing services, we provide ongoing support for all of these areas, so pension, non-insured benefits and health, and also additional support for HR for companies who perhaps don't have HR on the ground here and they want a little bit of extra support. We also help with that. Okay, so we're nearing the end of the webinar now, and I just want to summarise the kind of the key takeaways and the lessons here, and what we've discussed in today's session. So really, the benefits environment in Israel is super complex, very difficult to manage for global companies. And there's a common theme that we're seeing here amongst companies, amongst our clients. They want information in English, in plain English. They want to be able to understand what is going on in the benefits world in Israel and with their vendors, and communication. They want to be able to receive their communications in English and not necessarily in Hebrew. That's very important. It's definitely a common theme that we see throughout all the companies that we work with. And all of this, I guess, leads on to the compliance issue, which is number one. You yourselves as companies, you want to make sure that you are compliant with all of the regulations and all the legislation that's in place, and make sure obviously you're not getting any fines. So yeah, that's you're not alone. It's very complex, the benefits in Israel, and we can help you manage your relationship with all your vendors and your day-to-day processes here in Israel. If you want to read a little bit more information about what we've spoken about today, and also other useful information about benefits in Israel, there's a couple of websites you can go to, or links. So our website is aktglobal.com, and please contact us. The email address, you can see info@aktglobal.com. Contact us, be in touch with any questions that you have, any queries. Even if you just want to reach out and say hi, I'm there and I'd be happy to have a discussion with you and talk about your setup and yeah, move forward from there. Hopefully we can help you, hopefully we can support you going forward. Thank you so much for listening to the webinar today on benefits in Israel. Please connect with us, as I said, on our website, by email, also on social media. We've got quite a big presence on LinkedIn and Facebook, so please do connect with us. Thank you so much for listening and have a great day.